All right. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Thank you all for joining. This is our first episode of Ramadan Conversations, in which we look to explore the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the context of revelation, and how revelation, i.e., Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, responds to Rasulullah in the various circumstances of his life. So, the very first conversation, if you will, that we're starting off with is Surah Alaq. Read, Iqra, the first revelation that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received. And the first thing that we want to relate with here is that when Rasulullah is in that cave, when he is there, what's going on in his life? What has gone on in his life before that? He just doesn't find himself in the cave and boom, revelation comes in and that's where his life starts. No, there is a whole life that he has lived, a very whole life, a very fulfilling life, a very productive life. And yet he's in that cave. And one of the indications that we get from a surah later on, and we're going to talk about that surah as well, this is going to be Surah Al-Duha, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as being lost. وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. We found you lost and we guided you. So one thing that we immediately know is that in that state, in the cave of Hira, in that mountain, in that cave, in that process of meditation, reflection, whatever it is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was doing, he was lost. He was looking for the way. He didn't know where to go. He didn't know what to do. Think about this. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is, by virtue of his marriage to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, one of the richest people in Mecca. He has, again, in the person of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the most loving wife. As far as emotional validation is concerned, as far as emotional connection is concerned, it does not get better than Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's own admission. How he longed for her, how he respected and how grateful he was for her love, for her support. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has a beautiful family. He has children. He has a social repute. He is known as Sadiq and Amin. He's the sort of person who has good relationships with everyone across the board, rich or poor, old or young. Everybody loves him. Literally, there is nothing in that social domain where you would think, oh, he had issues with people. There were conflicts that were going on. No, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was beloved to anyone and everyone who had met with him. And so a loving wife, incredible family, financially very well off, socially very well established. Why would a person with all of this feel the need to detach from this, detach from all of that, and retire, so to speak, or take this recluse in a mountain? And it's not an easy climb, climbing all the way up regularly. Take some supplies to last him just enough for days, and think and reflect and meditate and worship and whatever it is that he was doing over there. And one way to describe it, as we said before, is that he was lost and he was looking for a way. Now, immediately what comes to mind is that this is a spiritual recluse. This is a spiritual exercise that he is engaged in. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam is worshipping Allah there. And there is no doubting that, but this particular aspect that I want to focus on with respect to to this worship. Yes, it is worship. Yes, it is a spiritual exercise. But it is a spiritual exercise in which he has a problem that he is looking to find a solution for. He is lost. Again, the Quran's own admission, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. We found you lost and we guided you. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in the prime of his years, with everything that anyone can possibly imagine getting in that society. He has that. We just spoke about it. Yet, he is lost. It's not that he doesn't know Allah. He is a muwahhid. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was never a mushrik. He was never the one to bow down before idols. He understood idolatry for what it was. He identified it as falsehood. He did not engage in it. He was on the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam as best as he understood it, for as long as you can trace it back. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the particular area that he was lost in, that he was meditating, reflecting, worshipping Allah, and thinking about, looking for an answer in, is how does my tawheed, how does my understanding of God as being one, how does it relate with the problems out there in the world that I'm coming from? In that Meccan society, people are suffering. There is injustice. There is a particular class of people, the rulers, who pretty much, they're the constitution. They get to say whatever it is that they want to say. If they want to exploit people, if they want to cheat people, non-Meccans don't have rights. Slaves don't have rights. There is so much that goes on in that society in which women are treated like animals. Slaves are treated like animals. A master can just do away with, kill his slave, and that's okay. And we know that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had done all of what was in his power prior to this to help and support those who were in need. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not married to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, he would extend his help and support to anyone that he could find in his individual capacity, and he would help and support them. He couldn't do it financially, he would do it through manual labor. He would help them out. Regardless of who it was, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be there for them. When he got married to Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, there's a particular incident that we find in which he comes home and he's complaining to Khadija that there are people out there who don't have any protection against the sun. They're just there. And I wish I had the resources to facilitate them, to help them. And he was hurt by their pain. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha saw that. And she also saw that he doesn't look at my wealth as his. He thinks it's mine and he has no right to it. And so at that point, she went and made a public announcement that whatever is mine is his. Whatever I have belongs to Muhammad ibn Abdullah. It belongs to him. He wasn't a prophet at that time, but lo and behold, he became that richest man. And he did spend, both husband and wife spent day and night from whatever they had for the benefit of people, but it just wasn't enough. It simply did not. It could not, no matter how rich you are. You come to a recognition of the limitation of your resources. You can't eliminate injustice. You can't provide people with all of what they need. And so it is this pain, this struggle that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is bringing to that cave of Hira. Another aspect that we see, again, in the life before the prophethood began, before this revelation came, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is when there is a particular non-Meccan, and how his right, something that a rich Qurayshi owed him, somebody who's influential in the Quraysh, and he's rich. He owes a non-Meccan citizen, a foreigner, if you will, some money or some goods, and he does not give him. And that person implores the people of Mecca that this is my right, and your person and your citizen or your Qurayshi is denying me. And it was at that point that a group of Meccans got together in a pact of sorts. They made a little something of an organization, if you will. And they said, no, we're going to stand up for the rights of these oppressed people. And we're going to make sure that no one has to go through this level of economic exploitation. And it was this incident, this Half al-Fudul, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would even later as a prophet remember and say, if now in Islam I had an opportunity to be a part of something like that, I would be a part of something like that. That it was that noble of a venture. Now, it wasn't a religious venture as such, right? It was a social venture. But to ensure that he gives validation, a spiritual validation to those social ventures, as a prophet, he recollects and he says that I would have taken part in that again, even now. But in that cave in Hira, with this having been done in his past, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is recollecting, he has that in his background, but he knows he's still lost because apparently it wasn't enough. And we can deduce quite clearly that it wasn't enough because exploitation was still there. Injustices were still there. In this wonderful world made by that one God, that God of Ibrahim, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's great ancestor, this injustice, it didn't make sense. Evil that he saw around himself, it did not make sense. It hurt him. He's a very sensitive person. Other people's pain, the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam feels that pain, the level to which he empathizes. He was Ra'uf. Allah acknowledges that attribute about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of Allah's own attributes. Ra'uf, the ra'fa, the empathy, the degree, the capacity to which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sensitive to another person, another human being's pain. Allah acknowledges it with the same word that he uses for himself, Ra'uf. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in that cave is carrying that pain. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is carrying that confusion. He is bringing his lack of answers, how lost he is in whatever way he knows to worship Allah. So let's be very clear on one thing, that this is not a spiritual cutting off from the world, turning your back on it, as to having identified it as useless and lowly and despicable and something you don't want to have anything to do with, and looking to develop higher bonds or bonds with the Almighty. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is looking to develop bonds with the Almighty, but bonds that would help him respond to the situation on earth, respond to the situation in the society with people. That's his pain. That's where he's lost. He knows Tawheed, but he does not know how that understanding of Tawheed or that belief in Tawheed translates into social upliftment, into the eradication as best as possible of evil, making the world a better place so that people suffer less, so that the pain of people is less. It is the pain of people that brings Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to that cave, because in his individual capacity, he has made it, as we say. We cannot identify any economic or social reason as to why he would personally be in pain. It is his self-transcendence. It is his empathy towards other people that pains him so much that he detaches from those comforts and he is in the cave reflecting, meditating, worshiping Allah. It is in that state that he receives the first revelation. So this is the question that he brought to Allah, that he repeatedly brings to Allah in that situation. And the first response that he gets to this question is what? Iqra. Read. And so the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes the experience himself, that he was in this state in the cave, and some sort of transitory state between wakefulness and sleep. And this, what he would later identify as Jibreel, but at that time he would have been this unidentified creature, perhaps. What is this? This non-human something. He didn't know it was Jibreel. It was a terrifying experience. Comes to him and says, Iqra. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam responds, Ma ana biqari, I cannot read. I cannot read. The angel repeats the instruction, Iqra. Again, angel we know now in retrospect. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not know that. And he responds, I don't know how to read. Third time, again, Iqra. This time he holds him, he squeezes Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he felt that his ribs would collapse as if they would cross one another. Incredible pain. Again, that's one thing about pretty much every experience of revelation that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have later on as well. There was physical pain associated with it. And especially in the beginning, an incredible amount of fear. It was a very overwhelming experience. And that's when the rest of the ayat are revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min alaq, iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, alladhi allama bil qalam, allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. That's when he receives these 5 ayat. That's when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this is the answer to his inquiry. This is the guidance to his being lost. You want to do something about those problems. You want to figure out what your role is in the social context. You want to figure out how is it that you can solve anything at all. How is it that you can make the world a better place? Whatever it is that you don't like about the world. Again, it is pretty incredible that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the understanding of Tawheed that he did have, understood that it translated into doing something about changing the world as it is. As perfect as the world is, as incredible as the world is, as awesome as the creation of Allah is, at the physical or the biological level, at the social level, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of evil. There is a lot that has to be put up with. And why should you put up with that? His understanding of Tawheed, his understanding of God is not one in which he's supposed to passively accept all of what it is for what it is and just be okay with it. His understanding is such that he is moved to do something about it. It's just that he doesn't know what it is that he should do. And the response that he gets, you want to know what to do? Read. Read. Educate yourself. Find out. The first step, you're emotionally motivated. You're emotionally in that place. The desperation, the frustration, the pain, the anxiety, you feel it for the people. But that's insufficient. You can't simply be emotionally in that place and expect for that to be enough. You can't just start acting, because that's not going to be action, that's going to be a reaction. You can't simply start, okay, let me start fixing it. No, what you're going to end up doing is create more chaos, create more problems. The first step is to educate yourself, is to read. Let's go down to the very basics. Let's inform ourselves. And that's precisely what the ayat speak about. And I'm going to go into how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded to these ayat, perhaps tomorrow when we talk about the next revelation. But just going into the text of these ayat itself, what is the message that he's receiving? اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. Read in the name of your Rabb, the one who created. So why should you be educating yourself? Again, this is a response to a problem. How lost Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. He's bringing that lostness, the feeling of being lost before Allah, and the context in which he was feeling lost, I tried to elaborate before. Right? How does Tawheed relate with the evil in the world, the problems in the world? The response that he's getting to that, I can't reiterate it enough, is to read, to educate himself. Now, of course, in the context of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this particular reading is the reading and reciting of revelation of the Quran itself. But as we read within this text itself, education and knowledge and reading is inclusive of revelation, of course, but it is far beyond that as well. It is much more other than that as well. And so he says, read in the name of your Rabb, the rububiyyah of Allah, the idea that he is the one who takes you step by step through different stages of growth and development to the point of maturity that you attain physically, emotionally, socially, intellectually, spiritually. That Allah's rububiyyah, Allah being Rabb, what does it mean? It means the loving care, the nurturance that he provides so as to allow whatever it is that he is a Rabb of to reach its full potential. That is the rububiyyah of Allah. In the singular, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being reminded of Allah's rububiyyah. So your reading is with this background understanding of the rububiyyah of Allah. That just like the Rabb, just like my Rabb, Allah, brought me from stage by stage, step by step, to who I am right now. Reading is a continuation of that process. Educating myself, learning more, is a continuation of the process of Allah's rububiyyah, of Allah being Rabb. Only now, I am actively taking part in that process by allowing myself to be educated. By a lot of stages of my development were not in my control. My agency had very little to nothing to do with it. I wasn't consciously in control of growing when I was a fetus. That wasn't in my control. But now this I have to volunteer for. This I have to accept. Okay, I'm ready to be educated. I'm ready to read. I'm willing to go through that trouble in order to continue that process of Allah's rububiyyah, of Allah's stage by stage, step by step nurturing of who I am. Who is Allah alladhi khalaq, the one who created. What did he create us from? خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ. He is the one who created the human being from a clinging clot, from that what looks like a clinging clot, that leech-like substance. And we can go into the embryology of it. But when we do that, we lose one very important point, which is a reminder of the humility that is necessary to be educated. Remember where you came from? Remember who you were physically? Like an alaq, so utterly dependent on whatever it is that you were getting within the womb of your mother. So insignificant, so small, so tiny. Literally, if somebody were to gain access and flick, that alaq would have been flung off. It would have been dead. It would have been gone. It was hanging on for dear life, quite literally clinging and hanging on for dear life. And that dear life that was flowing through those vessels, the blood that was keeping us alive. That is how weak, insignificant, vulnerable we were physically. Allah created us from that to who we are today. Definitely, in relation to that alaq, much stronger, much less vulnerable. So the hope in this message is to think of that physical development that you underwent, and know that intellectually, spiritually, you are like that clinging substance, hanging on for dear life, very insignificant, very vulnerable. But this power of knowledge, this process of education, of reading, it can empower you. It can help you develop in a way that you become very strong. Again, as strong as an adult human being is when compared to an alaq, when compared to that stage in the womb of the mother where you're hanging on for dear life. Just like that, the process of education, of reading and reciting, reading and repeating, is capable of empowering you such that you go from the alaq to a formidable, respectable, noble. اقرأ وربك الأكرم. Read, and your Rabb is Al-Akram, the nobility that is associated with Allah. He being your Rabb, He being Akram himself, He is educating you so that karam, that generosity, that nobility is passed on to you as well. That the ikram of the human being in being educated by Allah, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Allah said, we have done this karam. We have accorded this nobility and generosity to the children of Adam. This akram, being akram, Allah associates with Himself. So what is education doing? What is this iqra doing? What is this iqra offering? So that you gain in that karam and move closer and closer to Allah. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram. Read, and your Rabb is al-akram. Again, one of the greatest obstacles in the path of knowledge is arrogance. And that obstacle is addressed by reminding us of our humble origins, the humility that a student needs to bring to the classroom, to a text, to a book, to a teacher, to the Quran, to Allah, in order to gain in that ikram, that nobility. So you're told of your origins, which are humble, which is that alaq, and you are told of the destination, the ikram, the karamness, or the nobility, that which Allah ascribes to Himself. Alladhi allama bil qalam. He is the one who taught with the qalam. He taught with the pen. What does the pen do? The pen preserves knowledge. The pen is a way that human capacity for knowledge, it expands itself. It goes beyond itself. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. He taught the human being that which the human being did not know. Inshallah, we conclude with this. I want to talk more about these last two ayat. I will do that tomorrow, first thing, in our next episode, and then we're going to move on to the next revelation that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received after this, what happened in the aftermath of this revelation. So hopefully, inshallah, we continue that and conclude in our next session. Very, very blessed Ramadan to all of you watching live or watching the recording. May Allah make this the opportunity that we all are in desperate need of so that however we are lost, we too can find our way. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.